Hi everyone, this is Jay Johnson with dailytexture.com. Today I'm going to do another in the digital studio. That's right, 2 in 4 days. I'm going to talk to you about blown out skies in this one. Most people don't like to shoot on cloudy days, especially, birds up in the sky. I love cloudy days and days when there is no sky, basically. It's just plain and not blue. And this is why. When you have a blown out sky, you can easily drop a texture or background or anything else in with your subject with no masking. And as far as no masking around the subject. And I'm going to take you through that with this image here I got of this hawk last week. This is a roadside red-tailed hawk that sits in the same spot all the time, and we stop alongside the highway and I jump out with cars and trucks and semis and everything else flying by, and I get this bird. And every time he sees me taking his picture, he flies. So I can get some really good flight shots of him. On this particular day, the light was horrible as far as what a normal photographer would look for. In my case, it was excellent light because I can blow out the sky. I love the pose of this bird as he came up off the branches. I don't like this branch here, so I have my clone tool selected. I'm in Corel Paint Shop Pro 10, my ancient program that I use. I'm just gonna, you might hear my computer dinging. Get rid of that branch right there. Okay, now I'm going to take him into Topaz Photo FX Lab. Now this sky is a little grayer than I would like. Normally I would raise my exposure up a little higher. I didn't have time in this instance to really check my lighting. This bird takes off as soon as he sees me taking his picture. And I'll usually, when I'm shooting against the sky like this, I'll usually take a couple shots and then check my lighting to see if I need to raise the exposure up a little higher. I didn't do that in this case because I didn't have time. So the sky is a little grayer than I would like. The bird is a little dull. And it's also very noisy because I had my ISO up pretty high. First thing I'm going to do is denoise this because I know there's a lot of noise in there. And I'm just going to go with strong. That's about as good as I can get with something like this. So we'll let that process. Now, you can do this with anything, not just birds. If you have a subject like still life, for instance, that you're photographing, photograph it on a white background and raise your exposure up and blow out that background. It makes it a lot easier to drop a texture behind the still life. Like, for instance, a vase full of flowers. Who wants to mask around all those petals? I don't. I find that kind of subject very frustrating to me, but I've learned if I can blow out the background and make it completely white, then it's so much easier to replace that with something else. All right, the denoise is done. I am going to either use clarity or I'm going to see how I can brighten this bird up a little bit. I'm going to try HDR collection first. And that brightened him up somewhat, but it put sort of a white circle around him, so I'm not going to use that. Sometimes I use that. Normally I use clarity, so I'm going to go to that. Fur and feathers. You guys have heard this a million times. There, that boosted him up nicely. So I'm going to click OK and accept that. That just brings out his details a little bit better. Alright, now I'm going to duplicate this, and you got a couple of ways you can brighten this up to get rid of the gray. In Topaz Photo FX Lab, there's an on this adjustments tab, there's one for exposure, which you can just slide to the right a little bit and see how it brightens that up. That's one way to do it. If you're not using Topaz and you want to do this, take your duplicate and set it onto screen mode, and then adjust your opacity to your liking. So you can do it that way to brighten up that sky, or you can use the exposure. If you do it this way, you want to go ahead and merge these layers so you have a clean image to start with. I am going to raise the exposure up because I feel that gives me a little bit more control doing it that way than screen mode. But screen mode is a way to do it if you don't use Topaz and don't have a way to adjust your exposure. So I'm just going to raise this up to where I like it. I don't want him getting too bright like that. So I'm just going to raise it up to maybe about 86. So turning that layer off, that's showing the previous layer how gray it was. Now it's bright. In fact, it might be a little too bright. I'm going to bring that down to maybe in the 60s. That's good. But I'm going to go ahead and merge these now so I have a cleaner image to work with. All right. So now I have the brightened up image. I've adjusted his clarity. At this point, I can bring in a texture or background. I can drop any texture in here. Like, for instance, let's go to the monthly mix. This texture, for instance, I could bring this in and set it on multiply. You don't want to do darken, you're going to lose his feathers because he has white in his feathers. But you could do it on multiply and then mask the texture off of the bird to get him bright. I don't want to use a texture, I want to use a background. I have a certain background in the Scenic Mix collection, Scenic Mix number 6. It has the water, it has some land, it has a nice sky. I think the bird will look nice in this. And I'm going to set it on multiply, which basically just drops it in over that white background. And now I'm going to mask it off of the bird. Now I'll mask it off at full opacity first, which is going to make him too white. But I'm going to mask some of it back on him to maintain some of that color. And I'm not worried about going around the edges because I'm going to, like I said, mask some of it back. So I'm just going around the wings, just real quick, like to get an idea about his coloring. All right, now I'm going to go back the other direction, and I'm going to trim up around these edges and get rid of the white by bringing it back. Like so. Okay, now as you can see, this is too white, this is too white. So now I'm going to lower the flow. I'm still going to bring some of it back, but with a bigger brush, I'm just going to gently tap until I get it looking like I want. By having the flow, which is like opacity, lowered, I can just do this gently in the areas that I'd like to get rid of some more of that white, give him some of the color of the background. Maybe get that wing a little bit more. Like so. So now I'm going to bring in I could duplicate this texture layer and reset the mask or this background layer, but I'm just going to bring it in again. And I'm going to set it on soft light. Now that, when I go to soft light, that enriches the color of everything, including him. It allows, see, this is before, this is after. It allows him to pick up some of the color. That's a little bit too saturated for my liking, so I'm going to desaturate that layer a little bit, like minus 53. So that's before and that's after. It brings that light right here where I want it, brightens up everything. You can also adjust exposure on the background layer or texture layer itself. So if I wanted to brighten this up like this, now that looks like a more daytime shot. This looks like a more nighttime piece. I kind of like the daytime look. So I'm going to raise the exposure up on the soft light layer just to brighten it a little more. So that's before and that's after. I can see a little area right here. Let me blow this up. Right in here where it could be a little darker. So I'm going back to the original multiply layer of the background, and I'm going to bring back some of that right here. That doesn't need to have a little bright area right up under his legs. That needs to be a little darker. And then right here is a little spot. And maybe right here bring some of that multiply back over him. Right around his head a little. I don't want any white lines showing around him. By bringing that multiply layer back, it darkens that white lines. Okay, now. Okay, I like the way that looks. So at this point, I'm going to merge everything and then decide where to go. If I want to add another texture on top to shift the lighting a little bit more, if I want to adjust colors, I'm going to duplicate it. So I can always go back to the original if I don't like what I do from here. Now here, since I've merged everything, if I wanted to brighten it some more, I could raise the exposure of the whole piece, which I kind of like that right there. Raised it up a little bit more. It's making it look more like a morning or daytime shot. It would be nice if I had something I could put down here that he's going after, but I don't. But I would have done that before I got to this stage, if I did. I would have put 2 photos in and worked on both of them like I did him. Okay, I like that with that brightening. So that's before, and that's after with it being a little bit brighter. So I'm going to merge this again. I like the brighter. I'm keeping in my mind that my focus needs to be on the bird. The background doesn't need as much focus. I'm going to duplicate this again. So I'm going to go run clarity again on just the duplicate layer, and that pumps up his clarity. Well, it pumps up the clarity of everything. But I'm going to see how it pumped up the clarity of everything, including the textured background. I want the clarity pumped up on him, but not this. So I'm going to make a mask. I'm going to click invert. That puts a mask over the whole thing. It makes it all black. And I'm going to bring back the clarity on just the bird. I'm going to blow this up a little bit so I can see. So I've got my brush value all the way to the right, which means I'll bring it back. And this will bring back clarity on just the important part of the bird, which to me is his face, a little bit of his chest feathers, and his wing here, this particular wing. That wing I'm not worried about as much. And even come down here into these feathers a little bit. And maybe even this foot. So I'm going to go with a really small brush. I guess it's going to have to be a 1 to reach that. And just sort of go right up and down that leg, sharp, which brings that clarity into that. So this was before, and this was after I masked the clarity layer back on him. See, just a very subtle difference. Just enough to pump up his details a little bit in those areas. Now let's go back out and look at it. All right. That's before, that's after. It's just very subtle, sharpen this up. And if you didn't want to do that, you could just, after you blended your subject with your background, you could just select a certain area of him to sharpen if you wanted to sharpen. But I feel that that just adds that extra little boost to bring the eye to the bird. I really like this just as it is. I'm going to click from stack. I don't think I want to put any other texture layers on top. This one, I knew this background would work good with this bird because of the lighting. Got real strong light coming in from the front and the side over here, and that's hitting his wing. He had light on his wing and on his face from the front as he turned his face this way, and this background is the same way, so the lighting worked perfect. I could add another texture on top, like I said, if I wanted to, but at this point, I like it the way it is. I'm going to zoom out and take a look. Now see, from a distance where you would view art across the room, that looks really good. So I'm going to call this one done. And now I've just got to come up with a title for it. But that is why I like blown out skies, because it is so easy to drop a texture or background over your subject. And I will purposely go out on cloudy days when we have those gray skies, and I try to get my exposure turned up high enough where in the original picture the sky is just white. In this case it was a little gray, so I did have to make those adjustments to brighten it. But normally I would raise the exposure up when I'm shooting just to blow out that sky completely and make it white. But this is why I like that. It makes my job a whole lot easier. I've taken this original photo, which we will duplicate, bring up to the top. I've taken that, and in 15 minutes I've turned it into that, simply by dropping the background on top and choosing those modes like I showed you. So see, we've gone from that to that. Most photographers would not like this shot because of the, this is cloudy day, gray, dull, boring. Now it's exciting. Anyway, I hope that you found that helpful. If you're like I said, if you're shooting anything, even still life or anything, just raise that exposure up and blow out that background. You got to watch it. You don't blow out your subject, but if you shoot a picture and your subject is dark and your background is like gray or light, if you boost the exposure up to get your subject right and you blow out the background, it's okay, because you can get rid of it easy like I did here. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.